So today we're going to talk about the wheel. And to begin with, we're going to talk about, how many of you remember your first bike? Yeah. For some of us, that first bike was the most memorable gift that we ever got from Santa Claus, wasn't it? Yeah, pretty big, pretty big. And did you know that about biking, that cycling is one of the most efficient ways of transportation? It's much more efficient than actually walking, and it's more efficient than getting into a car, by far much more efficient. And it's a great form of exercise, isn't it? Right now, it is truly the exercise of choice. Depending on what bike, bike sales have gone up 60 to 120%. People are having a hard time finding a bike. A bike is a very important thing. And it's important, we have a good friend of ours, Ted Carl, who works with a nonprofit, and they give out bikes to children that do well in school. Okay. And how many of you, some of you I know out there, have ridden in the MS 150? Yeah. Joe, my husband, he's going on his 15th year of riding, and so that probably will happen next year. And we have one good friend of ours, Jean Nowak, who right now has raised $5,000 for the MS 150 in these times. And the reason I'm saying this, because we all know how important it is to keep our nonprofits and our spiritual centers growing, you know what I mean? And so they are, anyone who's helping with those are what I would call making meaningful change. Meaningful change. Do you get that? Meaningful change? I like it. So, but the reason I'm talking about bikes, I've given you a lot of facts. The reason I'm talking is I'm reading a book called The Exquisite Risk by Mark Nepal. And in it, he talks about the spokes as, and a wheel as being a metaphor for many different things. A while back, I had heard from Reverend Howard Caesar how he used the metaphor of a bike wheel. And in this metaphor, he was saying that the center was God, the universe, spirit, whatever you would like to call that center. And the spokes of the wheel were different religions. And so how, no matter what our differences are, we always move towards the spoke, and we all become one as we move towards the center of the wheel. So I want to give you another metaphor of the wheel also. We're going to keep the center as God, the universe. And we're going to have the different spokes of the wheel as us, individual people. And we're going to have the rim, the circumference of the wheel, as our family, our relationships, the world itself. And as spokes in the wheel, we are all very different. We're separate from each other. And as we go out, we become more what I would call unique. But as we come towards the center, we become more the same. We become more one with God. And that's the thing about us, that we're unique and yet we're also the same. It's what we would call the paradox, I like that word paradox, and I wanted to read you the definition of paradox. It's a statement that contradicts itself, or a situation which seems to defy logic. So what's a good example of a paradox? I like this example. If a person says, "I always lie," how can that be true? That is a paradox. And so we live our lives out also in the paradox, in that we are both unique and the same. And with our uniqueness, I see this at Unity Bay Area, Houston, in that I see our leaders, our volunteer coordinators, our AV team, our staff, our board, the many people that participate at Unity Bay Area, Houston. I see them leading and volunteering and coordinating and just being in very unique ways. Yet we come to the center and we are all moving towards our own spiritual growth. So it's the paradox of being unique and yet being the same. And here's a statement I found highly meaningful, insightful, and a little bit scary. I'm going to read it to you. When I look deep enough into you, I find me. And when you dare to hear my fear in the recess of your heart, you recognize it as your secret that you thought no one else knew. And that unexpected wholeness that is more than each of us, but common to all, that is a moment of unity, the atom of God. There's quite a lot of words in that, isn't there? And so what I want to do is explain to you what I think that means. And what I think that means is when I can recognize, when I can hear another person and hear their fears and recognize them as my fears, and when they can hear my fears and recognize them as their fears, then we become whole, we become united, we become more in our oneness. Now here's something though, I believe that sometimes when I'm being very passionately outspoken, when I am debating, when I am arguing with another about my point of view, I think that might be a little bit of my fear coming out. And when I hear someone else debating, saying this is the way everyone should talk or think, I think it might be their fears coming out. And when I can see their fears as my fears, even though they may look totally different, but I can recognize that, then I can realize our oneness with each other. And so that's one of the ways that I see this statement being played out in real life. Another way is, and I want to tell you a story that comes from the book. So the author of the book he is at the hospital. He has cancer. And there's another woman there, and she is Hispanic, and she does not know any English. And they stare into each other's eyes, and they recognize the fear that they have with this medical care and life itself. And at the same time that they recognize that fear, they recognize their unity. They recognize the atom of God between them. So isn't that true? How so often we don't need words to communicate. So often, like with Merite in the prayer, we can just hear the prayer no matter what the words are. And so communication doesn't need the actual words. And as I grow older, I recognized what is important, whether it's unsaid communication, but what is important in our lives is relationships. Not the type of relationships of who was most popular in high school. And I don't need a lot of relationships, but I do want relationships that are meaningful, that are deep. And sometimes those relationships don't have to be relationships that I agree with the other person on everything, because that might be where I find a little bit of my own spiritual growth, my wholeness, my atom of God. In the area of relationships, the book talks about a very interesting metaphor of how relationships can be seen. And this is from 4000 BCE, before Common Era, in Mesopotamia. Hey, try saying that 10 times. Mesopotamia. So in 4000 BC, in Mesopotamia, different tribes would come in, and they would trade seeds with one another. So this tribe would have one seed, and he would trade with another. And pretty soon the seeds just started mixing together. And then they started cross-pollinating. And this became what we would know of as our first form of wheat. That's how wheat started. Interesting. And so that's how relationships happen. We sort of spill into each other and spill over each other. And so what I'd like to do today is invite you to spill over into each other. Many of you have been coming to Unity Bay Area Houston for a long time. And then we have some that are brand new, that have been coming just a week or so. And I do know for a fact that not every single one of you have attended the new member welcoming service or the new member orientation. So I invite you now to come and join us on Tuesday or Saturday. You can do it through Zoom, or you can come here to the church, and we'll be having it here. It is a time, though, that what you're doing is you're telling the universe what your intention is. You're telling the universe, I want to move further into my spiritual growth. I want to read you a quote by Henry David Thoreau, and some of you may have heard it. If one advances confidently in the directions of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, she will meet with success unexpected in common hours. And so by coming to the new member orientation, you are telling the universe your intention. I want to grow my where I am spiritually. And the universe always responds in kind. Because I do know Unity principles work. And so if you want to see them advance, I invite you to come. If you're already a member of the church, that is great also. And we have a way that you can get more involved, get more into relationships. So Amy Grableski is our volunteer coordinator. And we have come up with many ways that you can get into relationships deeper. You can do it at home, or you can also do it at the church. And so if you're welcoming a time to get further involved, email Amy at amyheartgrow@gmail.com. Because relationships are important. Relationships are. Martin Buber, a great Jewish philosopher, says this about relationships. It is the space between us that holds everything. It is in this vital space between living things that the faces of God appear. I'm going to read that again. Relationships. It is a space between us that holds everything. It is in this vital space between living things that the faces of God appear. Relationships. So now in this time that we're faced together, we have many choices we can make. We can get deeper into our relationships, or we can choose to be in that area of debating and having strong opinions. And I'm not saying that it's not right to have strong opinions or to debate. We just need to keep it in that area of positivity. And then if we disagree with that person, we need to maybe see, is this my fear that is coming out? Is that why I am having this conversation? How many of you had that conversation where it's, oh, I don't know how they can see things that way. I don't know why they can't see the truth as I see it. And so this is a time to decide that the relationship is more important than any of our opinions, our debates, our arguments. And it might be a time that when you hear that person, you say, that might be their fear, that might be my fear. Or as I'm speaking, it might dawn on me, that is my fear coming out. And so we can go into relationships and know who we are. Who are we? We are a spoke in the wheel. We are a part of God, we are connected to God, and we are part of the wheel, the circumference. We are part of the outer rim. So I invite you this week to maybe go on a bike ride. But when you see a wheel, think of who you are. Let that be a symbol of your unity. Let that be a symbol of your oneness. Your oneness with the outside, your oneness with your family, your oneness with your neighbors, your oneness with that stranger that you meet. And then also remember the core, the center, the part of God that you are connected to. And let the two join. So as you go, know that you, each of you out there, is the essence of God. A God that lives within you, that is you, and that is always with you. A God that is good and that is love. And so it is. Amen and ah, yes.